Hi guys, good afternoon everyone. Thank you so much for being there and thank you so much for coming to our panel. So today we are going to be talking about one of the most popular topics, AI. But we want to discuss how India can use AI not just for economic growth, but also for inclusive development and public good. So before coming to Stanford, I was an applied AI engineer, and two of the foundational strategies for adopting AI are data and talent. And in India right now, we are very well positioned with both of these things. We are like renowned for our technical talent, and we also have a good foundation in terms of our digital public infrastructure. So today we want to discuss how we can utilize our strengths and position ourselves best so that we can utilize AI not just for like public services and like improving our public services, but also for becoming a global digital leader. So I'm going to start off with like a very broad question. Also feel free to like chip in with your expertise. What are the challenges and opportunities that you see in adopting India in AI today? And so Avneesh, I would like to start with you, since you've worked in like AI for infrastructure. What do you feel about it?
I mean, I don't think the question is what challenges. I think the question is how fast and rapidly India can adopt, right? I mean, the need is definitely there. The technology is obviously moving in the right direction. I look at AI as something that allows you to sort of understand highly complex system and make improvements accordingly, right? India has a lot of complex problems. India has a lot of smart engineers. I actually believe Mr. Pai also mentioned, right? Access to capital is definitely an issue if you want to adopt these systems at large scale. It's very expensive. So if I was to put a point there, I would say probably access to capital would probably be the biggest issue, and that's maybe where the government can help as well. So,
yeah, I would like to add that it's digitization and access to broadband connectivity, broadband internet, which is not gone beyond the cities as much. So doing something like a satellite internet that covers the whole country would be the equivalent of laying the freeways around the country, right? And the other challenge for India is really in terms of heterogeneity in its languages, its biology, and culture. So for English-speaking people, there are plenty of large language models to play with. There's ChatGPT to play with. But what do you have for a language like Tamil, for example, or Telugu, or Hindi, or So I think it's in AI circles, this is known as the long tail problem. And how do you actually solve that? And I think those things can really be made easier by some government help.
Prasad.
Yes, so let me talk about opportunities, because I think this is truly an exciting time. So for education, and everybody can feel it that AI can change education because we learn so much from it. But there is actually a fundamental theoretical basis for this. There was a famous educator psychologist called Benjamin Bloom, who in the 80s, he was at Northwestern University or University of Chicago. He wrote this seminal paper and he called it the 2 Sigma problem of education. Let me explain what that is. Basically, if you have education with a single instructor and say 30 students in a classroom, there is a bell curve of the outcomes of education, educational outcomes for those students. And then you take another group of students that is one-on-one tutored by an expert educator who is responsive to the students' current state of understanding and can tutor them to the next state in a very personalized way. That one-on-one tutoring, he showed that the outcomes of education were 2 sigma to the right. In other words, 2 standard deviations to the right and better than that first group. So he's established formally that one-on-one tutoring is better from an educational outcome standpoint. Well, for the last 40 years since he wrote that one-on-one tutoring was prohibitively expensive to do at scale. Well, by the way, this is why we have one-on-one tutoring for the rich people who can afford it and send people into classes or have private students, tuition, and so on. That's all fine. But at India country scale, that is impossible to achieve. And now with AI, there is the promise of that one-on-one tutoring coming at massive scale and at cost and at consistency, repeatability that was simply not possible before with just the humans doing it. Because now it's possible for AI to meet the student at their level of preparation, at their level of readiness, and provide the answers in the right personalized, customized way. This, I think, is truly the massive promise of AI for education. Let me tell you, there's a little caveat here. So the caveat, and so in terms of challenges, the big challenge is the following, that AI, as it stands today, is in a state that you need to get the student to a certain level so that the student can ask the questions to get to the next level. There is that little readiness that needs to happen. You have to cross that readiness barrier, and once that barrier is passed, the student can evoke the questions, or the AI can understand where the student is actually stuck by doing that assessment. And by doing that, you can get into that virtuous cycle of the question-answer loop, and go further and further. So, but caveats aside, the big picture that I see for educational impact of AI in education is that we finally can solve the Two Sigma problem.
Okay, so thank you. So Prasad, one of your focus areas is the India's rupees 500 crore Indian Center of Excellence for Education. So can you tell us a bit about how we can utilize that to, improve like AI upskilling?
Mic is not working.
Oh. It's not working. Hello? Oh. Okay, sorry. Yeah, thank you. So thank you so much for your thoughts. And Prasad, one of your focus areas is India's 500 crore Center of Excellence for Education. So can you tell us a bit more about that, and how is it bridging the gap between the ambition and the execution that we have today?
Yeah, so I'm fortunate enough to be associated rather informally with this effort. So let me explain what this is. So in the recent finance budget, the Minister of Finance announced 500 crores each for 4 different centers of excellence to be established in India. One of those is a Center of Excellence for Education under the Ministry of Education. And the goal for this Center of Excellence is basically to establish the foundation of how AI will be used to transform educational outcomes for students as a whole. It's a very big and massive undertaking. But it has started. The team is actually the money has been approved. The Minister of Education has been proposed a certain set of objectives and goals. There is a process underway to select an actual center, which will be an institute or a location. It is not yet decided where it will be, but that is very much something that's coming up very shortly. And there will actually be a so-called Section 8 corporation, which is essentially a corporation for public good in India, which will be established, wherein there will be a CEO, a board of directors, and sort of a whole staff under that CEO, with the express charter of delivering AI excellence, using AI for educational transformation. So this is a call for all of you folks here. Any of you who are passionate about this area, any of you who are interested in this area, should certainly try and put yourself in this path. There's actual money, there's an actual institute that will be selected, and where a formal corporation will be formed to go address this problem.
So actually, I want to just add, it relates to the question you had asked earlier, and sort of what can India do. We have a lot of engineers in India, and we're doing sort of a lot of core AI work. I think training people in the latest technologies of AI, sort of India can do a lot better, and that's where the maximum return will be. Beyond that, we've talked about sort of the hunger, whether it's the engineers or the entrepreneurs or the people of the country, that will take over. But I think learning those skills is going to be a huge force multiplier. We see that.
Yeah. So just to add to both these points, which is the AI research and the breakthroughs that are happening on an economic model that's based in the Western countries. It is not designed for India or any developing countries. So when you take the same technologies to a country like India, the economics don't make sense, right? So there have to be some research, some development work done, and that's actually being done in different places in India where the way you train models is lower cost. The way you do model inference is lower cost. The way you do data computation is 5 times lower than the cost here. So there are companies and new technologies, the new ideas on the same technology stack that's been developed here, being done in a different way. And that, to me, goes a long way in terms of how AI technologies get adopted.
So I actually, I respectfully disagree. Because I think India, a lot of speakers earlier talked about sort of the India market is relatively a very small market, right? And the propensity to pay is also low, right? So if Indian companies want to succeed, they need to build for the world, right? If you want to build for the world, it has to be at the same level of quality that the world cares about, right? So we have a little bit of a chicken and egg problem here, is that capital is not there, but if you build high quality stuff, the capital will come.
Sure.
So I don't think India should compromise and build
India.
But India, that'll happen as a byproduct.
Sure, but AI products built in India, if they lower the cost for people in India, they also lower the cost for people here.
But cost I think the focus on cost it's fine as one element of focus, but I think this is an opportunity India needs to build for the world.
Sure.
When we talk about $1 trillion coming out of the country, when we talk about building the next Google and Facebook, it's not going to be a cost parameter. It's going to be building the latest technology.
Yes. Look, I'm not debating that at all. But if you can build a product that gets to a 10, 20, some tens of millions of dollars revenue in India, is likely to succeed here as well in a big way. That's the point I'd like to make.
Thank you. So turning a bit towards smart cities now, which is again one of the biggest initiatives of the government. Avneesh, since you worked at applying AI on the edge to improve logistics and road management, what are some of the lessons that we could take away to improve our road infrastructure, our logistics, and our smart city initiatives?
So look, like I said earlier, right? AI is all about making sense of complex systems and upgrading them, right? So clearly, whether it's logistics or smart cities, right? I mean, they're obviously very complex systems. The smart cities is not my expertise, so I don't want to pontificate too much on it. But clearly, these are very complex systems. I mean, I lived in India for 10 years recently. The urban infrastructure is decaying. I mean, let's be honest. That requires a big reboot. And if smart cities can help, that's fine. But there may be some basic things that we can do that may not require AI. I think AI cannot be the solution to everything. In some cases, it's obvious what needs to be done. It's not happening. So, it's not my area, but I would say AI, if AI helps, that's great.
Yeah. What about logistics? And do you see a solution like your driver.ai coming into India?
No, we are already commercial in India.
Okay.
No, we are already deploying in India. No, logistics, there's huge application. There's applications in safety. India's accident sort of safety record is actually very, very poor. I mean, we have the data, right? We're doing about 1 billion miles a month right now. In India, accident rates are 10x the US, right? It's quite sad. And clearly, the road infrastructure is a huge factor, but sort of technology awareness, technologies like ours for improving safety, eventually towards a path of autonomous driving would definitely help. Efficiency through routing and logistics, right? I mean, fuel efficiency, vehicle predictive maintenance, huge applications for AI. And it's happening. I'm not saying something that's futuristic. It's already happening. We are doing some of it. There are other companies much bigger than us doing even in larger scale. And again, the way I look at it is maybe the transition happened a few years ago. I think India is part of the global stage, which means the solutions to India are going to be very similar. And people need to build for the world. And India is a great place for talent. And use that. And obviously, when people are in a certain region, they understand that region better, so they tend to gravitate towards that and solving those problems. That'll happen naturally. But the one mindset, at least I strongly believe in, I've always believed in, India can be the R&D capital of the world, and that's where India should invest in.
Okay, yeah. So Sanjeev, with your background, and would you want to explain how we can build that infrastructure? Not just the hard infrastructure, in terms of compute and networking, but also soft skills to expedite India as the R&D capital of the world. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you focus on building sort of frameworks, infrastructure, policies, so that you improve adoption of AI, which is the lifeblood of AI is actually data. And you can look at, so see what's happened with the India stack, for example, right? And that's on the consumer side in terms of Aadhaar, UPI, and then Ayushman Bharat for the health side, right? And there is data there's derived data out of these systems that is now available for public consumption. Similarly, there needs to be, if you draw the parallels between what happened in the US recently and what can happen in India, for example. So you have this agency called ARPA, or ARPA-H for healthcare. And these are research organizations funded by the federal government, and that are providing things like data sets, reference data sets that can be used for, it's like genotype, phenotype for the population, okay, which can be used for medical research. There are genomic databases, there are, for public health, there are disease databases, and so on. So similarly, that infrastructure can be established in India, and actually with the current budget, the effort has started with the COEs that the government has announced. So as things get more digitized, there will be more effort put into collection of what's called master record of information, which can be used both as a reference information as well as something that can be analyzed and mined for insights. So I think that's where the government can help. And the other part they can help with is like the place where the private sector and the public sector meet, and which is really, if you look at it, that's in accelerators at research institutes, like Tier 1 institutes. IIT Chennai has a good one, IIT Bombay has a good one. So that's the part where I think the government can invest. And in fact, the current budget had something called Deep Tech Fund of Funds, money set aside, which is about $2.5 billion. So some of that investment can go into these places to set up computing centers where you can give access to GPUs or compute platforms that are not easily available to new startups coming up, right? So I think that those are the places where we can make a difference in terms of infrastructure that can help AI.
So I guess like my question is, what next? So I would like to ask you, Prasad, now that AI now is like often compared to earlier tech revolutions like mobile, internet, etc. So what are the parallels, since you've been like in the Silicon Valley for so long, what are the parallels you can see with the earlier tech revolutions in terms of pace, equity, and like how can we utilize those learnings in India?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think we were just talking about it at our lunch table, and we've seen this movie before where the internet came along, and it was a sort of an open revolution. It open in the sense that the standards are open, but it was also open for companies to come up and build, and I think, especially today, where we stand today with all we said earlier about the capital, the smarts, the engineering talent that's in India, I think we talked about two possible models that we can take. One is the China model, build a closed wall garden, and let only local companies survive. India could adopt that model and say we'll only let Indian LLMs into the Indian context. And I think that would be a mistake. I think it should be a fully competitive, open market model, where of course Indian companies should compete and should build their own infrastructures, should build the LLMs, should build the stacks on top of the LLMs, and compete for market share basically in an open way. as much as you let the American companies in that want to come in. And here we are, benefiting from that. For example, the mobile revolution. Look at what happened because India was able to, bring in the mobile phones, which were essentially Android. You can call that, American technology, but the airwaves were Indian, and the Indian telcos and mobile operators competed like crazy to have absolutely amazing cost driven down. So we have done this before. Indian companies are capable of driving costs down with an open competitive mindset, and let the American companies come along, let the Chinese LLMs come along, and I'm quite confident that India will develop its infrastructure with its hyper-competitive nature. What was said in the prior panel, that it should not be afraid of competing on the world stage.
Yeah. Thank you. Avneesh, a question for you next. So if you could redesign today how India approaches AI for infrastructure, what is the one thing you'd change in terms of public-private collaboration and regulation to accelerate real-world impact?
So again, it's sort of maybe based on my experience, right? So what I see the most is access to talent is probably what I see as the biggest force multiplier for big global companies to do even a lot more in India, right? And what that means is a very strong, and it's not just students. What I also mean is, having sort of the latest research in universities and ability to transfer that research to private. Now, I was at Stanford for a long time. I saw what this university did and how closely it interacts and sort of the influence it had on sort of entrepreneurship. A lot of my professors were entrepreneurs, very successful entrepreneurs, or the students were entrepreneurs. India is beginning to do a little bit of that, but I think that can accelerate. I think the government, and I don't know all the policies there, but encouraging professors to participate in the private industry, encouraging universities to participate with private companies, get the sort of, use the best IP language rights and stuff that universities like Stanford have pretty much perfected. I think encouraging that cross-pollination would be fantastic, right? And then you'll have some of the smartest people in academia with companies who are hungry to work, and that collaboration will just take off. So I'm very bullish on that. I'm seeing a little bit of, we collaborate very closely with the Indian Institute of Science in India, but I'd love to take it to the next level. It's moving slower than I'd like.
So if I could add, in terms of what the government could do, three things they could do. So one is sort of provide satellite internet, like provide broadband connectivity to the whole country. And I think India is well ahead in space to actually pull that off. Second is there was a regulation passed 2 years ago, DPDP. It's about data protection at the consumer level. Similar efforts need to be put in place for non-consumer data. And that will actually create a framework for data marketplaces, okay? Just like you have here. And the third is basically encourage the combination of federal agencies, central agencies with research institutes in medicine in different areas to provide what I call reference data sets, which the private sector can use to actually produce goods and services on top of that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for talking about how we can improve the AI ecosystem within India itself. But now I sort of want to go on to the next layer, which is going global. So what do you think, how can we establish India as a global leader in AI today? And this is an open question to all three of you, and maybe Prasad, we can start with you.
So what does it mean to be a global leader in AI? So let's talk about foundational models, right? Because that everybody understands. Here's the thing. Even in the US, the foundation model wars are going to settle very quickly. There are essentially just like any large fundamental market, there's going to be a small handful of very large players. And we know the ones that are competing. Google is definitely amongst them. OpenAI is definitely amongst them. Microsoft sort of is in that orbit. Amazon, sadly enough, large as it is, has tried its hand and hasn't succeeded quite as much yet. So it's amazing that a multi-trillion-dollar company still hasn't succeeded. And finally, there is of course Anthropic and others, and then there's the open source on the other side. So I think the real question becomes for India: should it play in the foundation model game? And my view is those wars are already ending, even in the United States. Where India can play, however, is in taking open source models and fine-tuning them for the Indian context, because there is a tremendous amount of Indian context. And by Indian context, we all understand what that means. It's, of course, languages. It is also the Indian cultural context, where we talked about ethical AI, which is things that are okay in the Indian cultural context and that are not. And that's an important part of where AI has to be steered. And so with those two things, there is a tremendous amount of opportunity. And then there is the markets, the special use cases in India that would be relevant to our Indian needs. Education, for example, is an area I can talk about. For example, today, Udemy, large as it is, has about 16 million learners in India in aggregate. That's a reasonable number. But it actually pales in comparison to the 265 million primary students in primary education in India today. 265 million. So if my sort of vision of solving the two sigma problem has to be realized, and every one of those 265 million students needs to have a tutor, which is tutoring them for, let's say, 4 hours of instruction every day at 1 token per second. Count up all those tokens, and we're talking about trillions of tokens that need to be generated out of that infrastructure. So at that point, you need to talk about the cost efficiency of token generation. And this can come through a variety of ways. There's some fundamental limits, because ultimately you are doing a large amount of compute in the giga and teraflop range to generate every token output. But there can be a stratification. You can use smaller models for certain focused tasks. You can use deeply distilled models. You can use highly fine-tuned models in certain sub-areas to make them very, very good at those subset problems. So there's got to be this cost-centric, high-scale approach that you can still apply using the techniques I described to still be able to generate trillions of tokens that we will need to educate the 265 million students that are out there.
I think India can build for the world. There's no question about it, which is by going global. This is what Avataar does in each of its investments. And I can just share with you some ideas that we looked at recently that will give you an idea that that things coming out of India can be unique in the world. So there's a new data processing engine that's a better engine, could be a better engine compared to, let's say, Snowflake or Databricks or the dominant ones today. And what I'm amazed at is the imagination and courage of the next generation to actually think of ideas or go after things that normally wouldn't get funded. There is a new the quantum computing company that's come out of India, that's come out of Bangalore, which is trying to do something around molecular modeling and for drug discovery as well as material science. There is talking about token generation, which is about model inference. There's a company called Zero Labs that has come up with a way to do model inferencing on CPUs rather than GPUs. So that changes the economics of AI deployment very significantly. So there are things that are happening that we'll probably, some of these will hear about in 2-3 years time frame, and there's no dearth of ideas coming out of India for the world.
So, sort of going forward on what sort of Prasad mentioned, right, is horizontal AI platforms, right, like OpenAI and Anthropic and all, right? In my mind, I mean, those require massive amounts of capital. developments already happening. And while we all talk about eventually capital will come, there's sort of a practical issue right now in terms of access to capital. But what Indian entrepreneurs can do very well is focus on niche vertical applications, build solutions. And AI is just now a tool, right? To say use AI, it's almost like it's like use Python, right? I mean, you're going to do it, right? So I think it's more about building for vertical applications. But I do think what's important, even in our journey, right, is I'm repeating what others have said as well, but it's my experience as well. Go-to-market is difficult. The revenue is global, right? Why restrict yourself to a $4 trillion economy when you can go after a $50 trillion global economy, right? So you want to go for a global market. For the go-to-market, especially US is one of the the best markets to go after, right? You want to supplement with go-to-market skills over here. You want to supplement with technical talent over here. US still has the best experienced talent in AI, no doubt, right? And so you want to leverage that as well, right? And I think this is where forums like this and people here who are well connected, have access to capital. I think if they can help Indian entrepreneurs with finding the go-to-market motion in the US, I think that'll be amazing, right? I think that can just unleash a lot of entrepreneurial spirit and a lot of success will happen.
Thank you so much. I would now open it to the audience for questions.
Hi, I'm Dhaval, a Stanford alumni. The question I had is about the products in India that make it or don't make it worldwide. Obviously, a lot of great things we are seeing happening in India, we are all proud of, right? But what is different now than before? Because we've been talking about this since last 15, 20 years, right? PC boom, internet boom. But why has that not happened before, and what will change now to make it happen?
So, I guess I'll go first. I think you were looking at me. So, I think it's access to knowledge, right? So I think there are two things. One is, a computer is no longer a novelty, right? As we all know, right? A lot of the younger you can start with access to computer, the more ingrained in you. So it's like sort of learning a language. That's already happening. There are a lot of people in India, not everyone, but a decent number who have access to this compute and stuff growing up, right? And access to knowledge, right? It's amazing the kind of access to knowledge everyone has. If someone in India has the same access to knowledge as anyone in the US or abroad, right? Sorry. And then, the success breeds success, right? Already Indian companies are successful. The younger generation is getting hungry and ambitious, right? They are being very ambitious. So I think it's sort of almost like you can see everything converging together you get the feeling, why not? You move from a question of, what can India do to, it's like, why wouldn't it happen, right? I mean, you almost have to think of reasons why this will not take off. And to be honest, unless something dramatic happens, I think it's an inevitability that Indian companies will do well, as good as any American company.
Actually, if I could add to that, it's know-how. There is research, there's technology, and then there is know-how to build a business around it, which is what is changing rapidly. Okay, this is the entrepreneurial mindset, which is picking up. Every time you see a success, you learn from their successes and mistakes, right? Or if you don't have a success, right? So I think it's the scale of entrepreneurial activity. I mean, I spent 8 years in Bangalore heading R&D labs for Silicon Valley companies here. And this is from 2006 to 2014. And in the 10 years that I've been away from India, there's been a radical change in terms of, the technology is evolving everywhere, and people around the world get access to it like in no time, right? But what's different is, how do you solve a problem given a new toy, new piece of technology, right? And then having the know-how to understand the economics and the cost behind it. And then the know-how to build a business is what the Indian next generation is learning in spades right now.
Any other question? Okay. Since we're nearing the end of time, and I've already been told twice to end it, I would like to end it with a rapid fire round for you guys. So if you could tell one thing, one piece of advice to the Indian younger generation today, entrepreneurs, investors, educators, what would you say to them so that we could become a leader in AI? So anybody can start, whoever feels ready.
I'm going to say learn everything about the technology. Go deep, understand it. It's not a black box. If you ask the questions, you'll get the answers.
Learn the answer to the so what question. Every technology is new technology, but so what? Does it solve somebody's pain? So if you can figure out how to solve the so what question, you'll succeed.
I would say think global. The world is 10x, 20x bigger, and you can do it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.